ID now. That's what Officer Brenner barked to a man reading a paperback on a park bench. No noise, no threat, just a black man with a book. He was slammed in cuffs minutes later for disturbing the peace by sitting silently. But what Officer Brenner didn't know, the man he was detaining was Isaiah Cole, Supervisory Special Agent, FBI, a man who teaches police how to spot bias, now arrested because of it. And when the truth came out, the system shook. If reading in a park can get you cuffed, what does that say about the peace being protected? Because sometimes justice doesn't shout. It just stands up quietly and doesn't sit back down. Spring had just arrived in Juniper Hill Park, bringing with it the cool, gentle sunlight Isaiah Cole had always loved. He sat alone on an old stone bench near a small lake, holding a paperback novel, his eyes fixed on the words as if the rest of the world had gone silent. He wore a white shirt, dark jeans, clean sneakers. No headphones, no phone, just a book, like hundreds of white men had done in the same park. But Isaiah knew the looks he got were never quite the same. And right then, a police SUV pulled up near the stone path. Isaiah didn't look up, but he felt the shift in the air, the engine hum, the car door slamming, the heavy footsteps closing in. He'd heard it many times before, in many different places. But today, it came right behind him. A voice cut through the air, dry, unfriendly. "Sir, I need to see some identification." Isaiah looked up from his book, slowly closed it. The officer standing in front of him wore a badge that read, Officer Chad Brenner. Pale under the sun, his narrow eyes studied Isaiah like a puzzle he didn't quite trust. "Did I do something wrong, officer?" "I asked for ID. There's been some suspicious activity in the park." "How long have you been here?" "I arrived about 10 minutes ago. Just sitting here reading. I haven't done anything wrong. And under state law, I'm not required to show ID unless there's a legitimate reason." Isaiah's voice wasn't raised, but it was clear and steady. He had studied law. He had stood in war zones. And he understood the power of staying calm. But Brenner stepped closer, his voice tightening. "Where are you from? What are you doing here?" "I have the right to ask for ID if I suspect you're disturbing the peace." Disturbing the peace by reading? That one line froze the air around them. A few people stopped at a distance. A young woman near the snack stand raised her phone. Brenner breathed harder. "You're refusing to show ID? I'll have to take you in to verify your identity." Isaiah stood, never breaking eye contact. "If you want to know who I am, you could have just asked respectfully. But the fact you're ready to cuff me for reading in a park says a lot more about you than it does about me." Brenner clenched his fist. "Turn around, hands behind your head." Isaiah knew that resisting now would only make him the excuse. He complied, but in his eyes, there was nothing but deep disappointment, not for being arrested, but for being proven right, that in some places, just being a black man breathing was reason enough to be seen as a threat. Cold metal snapped around his wrists. Isaiah walked slowly across the damp concrete path under the early morning mist, led away from the park like a criminal in broad daylight. Bystanders began to turn. Some took out their phones. One woman shouted that there was no reason for the arrest, but Brenner didn't care. To him, this was order. A black man in a public park, refusing to show ID, was a threat to neutralize. Isaiah didn't speak. He didn't cry out, didn't shout, but in his eyes, calm, sharp, it was as if he was the one in control, not Brenner. Inside the patrol car, Isaiah leaned against the seat, gazing out the window. He could feel the pulse in his palms where the cuffs pressed the skin, but that wasn't what concerned him. He was thinking about how this system wasn't built to protect him, but to fit him into a frame. Thinking about the times he taught behavior training courses to new FBI recruits, how to handle situations without bias. And now he, an active federal agent, was being hauled in like a thief simply because his skin didn't reflect the sun the way it should have. At Ridgeway Police Department, Brenner led Isaiah straight into Room B, 12 without a word. The young officer on duty glanced up, a bit surprised to see the man in cuffs, so composed, walking as though he were leading himself into a scheduled meeting. Inside the room, Isaiah was asked to sit. He didn't resist, not a wasted motion. He simply looked up, meeting Brenner's gaze as the cuffs came off. "What's your name?" Brenner asked, holding a clipboard. "Isaiah Cole." "Occupation?" "I think you'll find out soon enough," Isaiah replied, with the slightest lift of his lips. Brenner looked up, frowning. That calm confidence in Isaiah's voice unsettled him. That attitude, unapologetic, unafraid, completely broke the script he was used to. "We'll be running your background." Isaiah glanced around the small room, the fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow that only made the faint bruises on his wrists stand out more clearly. "I'm sure you will. And when you do, I hope you'll have the courage to face the mistake you just made." It wasn't a threat, not even close to retaliation. It was a reminder, quiet but heavy as stone. When Brenner left the room, Isaiah leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced in front of him. His heartbeat slowed. Pressure didn't scare him. But this time, he wasn't just standing for his own dignity. He was standing for every person who had ever been cuffed, not because they were guilty, but because they were presumed guilty. Captain Laura Stone moved briskly down the second-floor corridor of the Ridgeway Police Department, holding a thick folder marked Confidential Request, Federal Cross-Check. Beside her walked Officer Ray Mendoza, tall, lean, forehead creased with concern. "You're certain this is the man Brenner brought in? A black man reading a book in park?" "Yes, Captain." No disturbance, no resistance. But Brenner insisted he had reason to run an ID check. "When I ran the name in the system, I found something unusual." Stone pushed open the command office door and dropped the file onto the desk. Bold print across the page read, "Isaiah Cole, Supervisory Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation." For a moment, silence blanketed the room. She didn't say a word, just removed her glasses and rubbed her temples. One of her officers, someone she defended more than once against questionable conduct complaints, had just wrongfully detained a federal agent for sitting with a book in the wrong skin color. "Bring Brenner to my office." "Now." Ray nodded and left quickly. Back in room B, 12, Isaiah still sat with his hands calmly resting on the table, gaze steady. He had predicted this moment from the minute he was asked for ID, not because he believed all people were bad, but because the system had long enabled men like Brenner to believe they didn't need a reason to suspect someone, just their instincts already poisoned by bias. The door opened. Isaiah looked up. A middle-aged woman entered, eyes sharp as glass. Behind her was Brenner, his face flushed, but still clinging to a facade of composure. "Mr. Cole, I'm Captain Laura Stone, commander of this unit. First, allow me to offer the Ridgeway Police Department's apology for what has happened." Isaiah stood, polite but unhurried. "I'm not here for a personal apology. I just want to know, is this normal in your department? Or am I just a lucky exception who made it into the paperwork?" Stone took a deep breath. It was a question she had always feared would come, and now it had come faster than she expected. "I assure you there will be an internal review. This does not represent the values we uphold." Brenner interjected, his voice edged with frustration. "I didn't know he was FBI. I was following protocol." "No, you weren't," Isaiah replied, voice low but clear. "You were following bias. Protocol doesn't instruct you to cuff someone who hasn't broken the law. Protocol doesn't give you permission to ignore the law because someone doesn't fit your expectation." Stone looked at them both. She knew this wouldn't stay within these four walls. It would spread. There would be press. There would be hearings. But before the storm came, she needed to do what was right. "Mr. Cole, I'll be handling this matter personally, and I hope you'll give us a chance to make it right. Not because you were the FBI, but because this never should have happened to anyone." Isaiah didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He answered with a single sentence that brought silence to the room. "I don't need privilege. I need justice." Captain Laura Stone gestured for Officer Brenner to leave the room. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting toward Isaiah as if searching for vindication. But the look from his superior offered no such shelter. Brenner gave a stiff nod and walked out, the door closing behind him with a finality heavier than metal. Now only Isaiah and Stone remained. No one spoke right away. The air thickened, as if every molecule in the room was waiting to hear what would come next. "I know your background, Isaiah. I've read your file. 15 years of service, combat experience overseas. Now the head of a special investigative unit focused on abuse of authority. People like you don't get touched easily. But this time you were. Isaiah sat upright, his fingers interlaced on the table in front of him. You're right. I've seen worse violations. But what really hurts me is knowing that I wasn't cuffed today because I'm an FBI agent. I was cuffed because I'm a black man reading a book in a park. And that didn't sit right with a white officer. Stone sat down across from him, face unreadable, but her eyes never left his. We're trying to change. You know that. I'm trying. I believe you, but I don't need efforts. I need real change. An unexpected interruption occurred at that moment. The hallway alarm blared, a string of urgent tones. Both stood instantly. The door swung open. Officer Ray Mendoza appeared, breathless. There's a group outside, 5 or 6 people, from a civilian anti-abuse coalition. They identified Isaiah from social media and are gathered outside the station. One of them is live streaming, showing a sign. Reading is not a crime. Check the law, Ridgeway. Stone clenched her jaw and turned to Isaiah, her tone sharp. You didn't organize this? I didn't, but the truth doesn't need me to flip a switch. On the control room CCTV monitor, the crowd outside came into view, not rioting, not yelling, just standing silently with signs. But the weight of that silence was heavier than any chant. Stone exhaled slowly. Things were slipping into a spiral she could no longer control. I'll convene an internal board. What Brenner did today wasn't just a mistake. It could lead to a federal lawsuit. I don't want to sue, Isaiah said slowly. But if nothing changes, someone else like me will go through it. And maybe next time they won't make a home. Stone nodded, barely, as if a new layer of weight had just settled on her chest. The conversation didn't end with a handshake, but with a wordless agreement. This wouldn't be buried. Not this time. Not with Isaiah Cole. The next morning, as early sunlight crept across the front steps of Ridgeway Police Department, the internal bulletin board was updated. A bold red headline appeared under executive orders. Officer Chad Brenner, suspended from duty effective immediately. Inside the captain's office, Laura Stone had just wrapped a closed-door meeting with the department's legal counsel. It wasn't a decision she came to lightly, but for the first time in years, she realized she could no longer defend the indefensible. She called Isaiah Cole back to the small conference room where yesterday's tense conversation had taken place. Brenner has been suspended, she said plainly. We'll proceed with an internal investigation under third-party supervision, outside my unit's direct authority. Isaiah nodded. He didn't look triumphant, didn't smile, just a small, firm nod as if confirming. Things were moving in the right direction. I'm not here to get someone fired, he replied. But if you only remove one person and never examine the system that created them, then nothing actually changes. Stone understood that, but she also understood the political price of systemic reform. Overhauling protocol, reassessing training programs, confronting the police union. It wasn't something any department had wanted to touch unless absolutely forced. Isaiah stood and walked toward a framed organizational chart hanging on the wall. His eyes moved from the top row down to the branching tiers below. The problem isn't just in individuals. It's in the way these branches operate without accountability. There's no oversight of the overseers, no transparency, no follow-up. Each officer functions like an untouchable fortress. What happened yesterday was a direct result of that. A long pause passed. Then Stone spoke, her voice softer this time. Would you be willing to help me? I can't change this alone. I need someone who understands the system but isn't trapped inside it. I didn't come here to be a symbol. But if I can help make sure that one black kid grows up without having to learn to keep their hands in their pockets whenever they see a squad car, then I'll do it. Stone looked up. For the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. Fragile, but real. All right, I'll call a meeting with the city oversight board. If we do this, we're doing it thoroughly, from the roots. From the hallway outside, a phone rang loudly. A young officer rushed past a glass door, carrying a thick file stamped clearly on the front. Review Board, Incident 47B. The Brenner case was no longer an internal affair. It had become the spark of a rising wave. Isaiah stepped out of the room, his gaze fixed at the end of the corridor. He didn't know where this would lead, but he knew one thing. If real change was to come, it had to start with those who refused to keep their heads down. That morning, on the third floor of Ridgeway Police Department, the atmosphere in the assembly hall felt different than usual. A small sign on the door read, "Internal Session," and no public access, but it couldn't stop the curious glances from outside. Behind the wooden door was the closed session of the Internal Disciplinary Board, where the decision would be made on whether Officer Chad Brenner was still fit to serve in law enforcement. Isaiah Cole sat on the right side of the room, not far from the board's panel. He wore a black dress shirt, no tie, his expression calm, nearly motionless. He wasn't there to demand anything, not to seek revenge. He was there to prove that the problem lay at the roots of the system. Across from him sat Brenner, stiff in his gray-blue uniform, his tie crooked and his face paler than usual. Beside him was a union-appointed lawyer, jotting notes and whispering. But once the projector turned on, the whispers stopped. On screen, footage from Officer Ray Mendoza's body cam played. The entire scene from the park that day, from the moment Brenner approached Isaiah to the point he cuffed him and put him in the car, was shown unedited. The audio captured every word. Brenner's voice was filled with commands and thinly veiled threats, while Isaiah spoke calmly and lawfully. One board member furrowed their brow at the phrase, "I have the right not to provide ID without legal cause." Another flipped through the state statute folder in front of them to verify it. Then, a second video played, from the cell phone of a civilian witness named Lily Hernandez, who had submitted the original to the Internal Affairs Office. The image was grainy, but clear enough to see Isaiah handcuffed without resistance. A small child in the park cried out, "Mom, he was just reading a book." A soft scraping of chairs echoed through the room. Isaiah remained still, but this time his eyes were locked on Brenner. There was no anger, just a blunt, unwavering truth. After the presentation, the chair, Mr. Samuel Cho, turned to Isaiah. "Mr. Cole, would you like to make a statement before the board deliberates?" Isaiah rose. His voice was firm, loud enough without a tremble. "I don't intend to destroy anyone's career, but I believe someone with the power to cuff another human being must understand the weight of that act. I'm not here today because I'm with the FBI. I'm here because I was once a child who grew up in the city believing that a uniform stood for justice." He turned to face the chair, then each member of the board. "I'm not asking you to punish a man. I'm asking you to pause, look at what's happening here, and ask yourselves, if we don't change this now, how many more innocent people will pay the price for the system to survive?" He sat back down. The room went silent. But it wasn't the silence a conclusion. It was the stillness before a decision no one could dodge. After Isaiah's speech, the board recessed into a closed discussion. Isaiah stepped out into the hallway, where the air felt just as heavy. Some officers looked at him quietly. Some nodded, some turned away. Not everyone in the system opposed change. But not everyone was ready to protect it either. As he waited in the reception area, an unexpected development unfolded. On a mounted TV in the corner, a breaking news alert flashed across the screen. Local news reported that a new video had leaked from within Ridgeway Police, a clip from a farewell party weeks ago, where a group of officers, including Brenner, made racially charged jokes mock civilians and spoke of random checks as night shift entertainment. The clip was short, under 2 minutes, but it was enough to make social media explode within minutes. The hashtag Justice Not Privilege began trending fast. People flooded the front of the station, not just activists anymore, but teachers, doctors, students. Isaiah looked at the screen, then through the glass door. Outside, a sea of people held up signs. "We are Isaiah." He had never asked for this. But now it was happening, and he could not step back. When the board reconvened, the air in the room had changed. The pressure from outside pressed down like an invisible wave, forcing the system to listen. Isaiah approached the podium a second time. He carried no notes, no paper. Every word came as if drawn from generations of silence before him. I used to believe that removing a few bad individuals could fix the system. But today I realize a tree doesn't rot only in its leaves. It decays from its roots. And if we only trim the dead branches while leaving the poisoned root intact, next season, the fruit will still be rotten. He paused briefly, then continued, his voice lower but stronger. I'm not here calling for more people to be fired. I'm calling for accountability. Look at your training. Look at your stop-and-search policies. Look at how reports get buried in offices and never reach the public. And I urge the leadership of this city, do not treat this as a PR crisis. Treat it as a historic opportunity to make things right. Silence fell once more over the room. But this time it wasn't fear. It was respect. One member of the board, the oldest, his hair nearly all white, nodded slowly, as if something long dormant had just awakened. Isaiah stepped down from the podium. He didn't wait to see how the vote would go. He only knew this. If even one person is still willing to stand and speak the truth, then hope is still alive. Not just for him, but for everyone who's never had the chance to speak. 3 days after the hearing, an official document was issued by the Ridgeway Disciplinary Board. The headline printed in bold, all caps. Permanent termination, Officer Chad Brenner. The stated reasons: gross violation of procedural conduct, abuse of authority, and behavior unbecoming of professional ethics. Isaiah Cole received the news in silence. No celebration, no social media post. He simply sent a short message to Captain Laura Stone. I'm ready to begin the harder part, rebuilding from the wreckage. That same day, a small session was held inside Ridgeway Police Department's training room. On the whiteboard at the front, a new heading was written in red marker: Unconscious Bias in Fair Conduct Retraining, Pilot Phase. Isaiah stood in the center of the room, no longer the subject of interrogation or surveillance, but the facilitator. Beside him was Captain Stone, now not just a commanding officer, but partner in the fight for internal reform. Some officers looked at him with caution, others with visible discomfort. One, sitting front row, crossed his arms and legs with a look of open disdain. Isaiah didn't flinch. Instead, he opened with a sentence that made every head in the room snap toward him. I know some of you think I shouldn't be standing here. Some of you think I broke the code of this department. But if that code means treating people differently based on the color of their skin, then that code should have been broken a long time ago. He didn't lecture. He told stories. From the times he was pulled over for not looking right, to the moment he was handcuffed in the same city he grew up in. Then he laid out the numbers on arbitrary stops, on unarmed black individuals shot, on the gap between internal reports and community accounts. During a break, Officer Ray Mendoza, the same one who had witnessed the park arrest, walked up to Isaiah quietly. You know, Ray said, that day I wanted to step in, but I wasn't sure if doing that would get me in trouble too. Isaiah placed a hand on his shoulder. It's all right. What matters is you're here today. And next time you face that choice, you'll know what to do. The door to change didn't swing wide open overnight, but it had cracked. And Isaiah understood. His role wasn't to tear it all down. It was to show those on the inside there's a way out. The session ended in silence. But afterward, another officer, this time one who had openly backed Brenner, approached Isaiah and said quietly, I'll think about it. That was the beginning. And sometimes, the beginning is all it takes to start again. A week after the first retraining session, with tension in Ridgeway Police Department beginning to settle, a familiar name reappeared on the visitor log: Chad Brenner. He returned to the station one last time, as scheduled, to clean out his locker in the changing room. No farewell, no send-off, just a temporary access card and an officer at the front door. Isaiah Cole was preparing to leave his office when he saw Brenner walking down the back hallway, the fluorescent lights stretching shadows across the gray tile floor. The two men, once silent adversaries, once the embodiment of truth too many refused to face, now stood less than 10 paces apart. Isaiah didn't avoid him. He walked toward Brenner, stopping just close enough to not feel threatening, but just far enough not to let the moment slip away. Brenner turned slowly. There was no defiance in his eyes now, only something heavier, tired, and a little lost. "I'm not here to rehash the past," Isaiah said. "I just want to say, I don't hate you. I just hope one day you'll reconsider how you see people, especially the ones who don't look like you." Brenner gripped the handle of his duffel bag tighter. He didn't speak immediately. His eyes were a little red, but they still held a flicker of the pride he had always clung to. "I thought I knew everything after nearly 20 years on the force," he said quietly. "But turns out, I never understood the most important thing." Isaiah nodded. "Understanding is the first step. Change is what comes next." A long silence stretched between them. No pat on the back. No forgiveness spoken aloud. But neither was there bitterness. Only two men standing in the bare truth, each carrying their own lesson. Brenner walked away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor like a final reminder of an era drawing to a close. When he reached the door, he looked back once, just for a moment, then disappeared into the afternoon light. Isaiah stood still for a few seconds before heading back to the conference room. A new plan awaited launch, expanding the training program, partnering with local communities, and implementing independent oversight policies. That brief encounter didn't change the world, but it proved that in a system seemingly immune to emotion, there was still room for awakening. And sometimes the most powerful lessons come not from victory, but from dialogue, even when the apology is never spoken aloud. Late-day sunlight streamed to the windows of Ridgeway Police Department, casting long shadows across the hallway floor. Isaiah Cole had just concluded his 5th meeting with the Internal Reform Group. The proposal he and Captain Laura Stone co-wrote had been approved. Mandatory recurring training on unconscious bias, independent oversight for stop and search procedures, and an anonymous reporting line for both civilians and officers. Not everyone agreed. There were silent protests, even public criticism. But for the first time, Isaiah could feel the gears of the system, slow and heavy, starting to turn in a new direction. He walked slowly toward the front doors, his reflection stretching out across the floor. At the reception desk, a young rookie officer nodded at him, not out of fear, but with respect. A small shift, but enough to remind Isaiah. Big change begins with quiet gestures. In the lobby, he spotted Captain Stone speaking with a group of young recruits. When she saw him, she paused the conversation and walked over. "I've requested funding to expand the program into the north end of the city," she said. "They said if someone's willing to lead it, they'll back it." Isaiah squinted at her. "You're aiming that at me?" Stone smiled, for the first time since their work began. "I don't think anyone else is steady enough to handle it." He nodded. No further words needed. They both understood. This journey had no clear destination. It was a long trail of adjustments, well-timed compromises, and sometimes battles without victors. Isaiah stepped outside. The late afternoon painted the streets in warm gold. He walked slowly through a small plaza, once the site of justice protests. Now it was quieter, not because everything was fixed, but because trust had begun to take root. He stopped beneath a large tree. In the distance, a young black boy rode his bike with a friend, laughing like injustice never touched the world. Isaiah smiled. His story might never make the history books, but it had left an imprint in the quiet current of change. And with every step he took, he carried a reminder, not for himself alone, but for all. Justice isn't a gift handed down. It's the result of standing up, even when you stand alone. And when one person finds the courage to do what's right, they don't just change their own fate. They pave the way for an entire generation to be treated more fairly. Isaiah kept walking, never looking back. He didn't need to. He already knew how far he'd come. What mattered now was ahead, and those quietly walking behind him.